follow on me. We're marching out into the night. Follow on me. We're standing up against a giant. Follow on me. We might be walking in the fire, but if it's where we're meant to be, then on me.
It is 1513. And for those of you who have been on the podcast before, you know that there is significance in that time. We start at 1513 because John 15:13 says, greater love has no one than this, than to lay down their life for their friends. And that's what my son Mark did. He gave his life to give the gift of life to his teammates. And I'm so proud of him. I miss him every single day. Not a day doesn't go by that I don't miss him. But there is nothing more noble or honorable than to give your life for your friends. So very excited that you are back with us today. And we look forward to a great guest with Ralph. And Ralph, can you hear us?
I'm trying to get in there. Can you
Technology. You good? We can see you. You want to speak and see if we can hear you?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, we have liftoff. We're good. So, and I think that even that, in as we prepared to kick off this crazy idea of 20 guests in 20 days with 20 challenges to encourage you in the midst of COVID-19 and the adversity and the transition, and not just in COVID-19, but in anything in life where we're transitioning out of, we wanted to give back to you. We wanted to give a gift. And this series has been our gift back to you. It has been a gift to Ryan and I as well, as we've done this and just been inspired, encouraged by all the amazing guests that we've been blessed to have on with us. But as Mark said in his last letter home, we could change our world by doing more random acts of kindness. And so this is our random act of kindness back to you, to let you know in the midst of this crazy times, you are not alone, that we love you, we care about you, and we are here for you. And so it is with great honor, Ralph, we thank you for being here today. Welcome.
Thank you.
And I would just like to share your bio with our guests. Ralph Broughton was born in Louisville, Kentucky. He is a father. His father was in the U.S. Army, so he spent his childhood in military bases across the U.S. and in Europe. He joined the Army in 1970 as an armor crewman and retired in 1994 as a command sergeant major. That is quite up the ranks, as we might say, from where you went. You had a tour in Vietnam where you were wounded and received a Purple Heart and deployed to Desert Storm while stationed in Germany. You are married with one son who works in law enforcement. And since retiring, you have worked in the building construction industry. And that was actually your connection with us today. You work with Ryan and you're a friend of Ryan's. And so we're excited to have you on today. Thank you so much for your service. I wake up every morning and never take for granted who pays the price for my freedom. So thank you, sir.
I'm grateful to be here with you.
You bet. So tell us a little bit more about yourself. Where you said you were in bases all over the United States. What are some of the places that you lived? Did you have siblings?
Well, I spent anywhere from Georgia all the way out to Texas as my father transferred and did different jobs. And then I spent 3 years in France when the troops occupied France, when we had the forces in France. In fact, as we were there when we were told to leave France and go to Germany. So that was a little bit of an experience. I was a little older then. I was in, I believe, the 8th grade at that time. And then back to the States again, to Fort Knox. We did several tours at Fort Knox. In fact, that's where I met my wife, Dolores, which this November we will have been married 50 years. And
Congratulations, that's awesome.
I guess she thinks I'm a keeper, and I think she's a keeper since we've made it that long with each other. And she's been a great mother to my son and a great wife through all the moves and all the deployments and everything I've been through. She's always been right there when I needed her. So, I'm very blessed for her. my dad retired. We left Fort Knox, and when he retired is when I was going to college, and I laid out a year. And my dad told me, he said, "Son, you're going to get drafted." And sure enough, that lottery number came up, and he said, "Well, you'll be better off if you join than if you get drafted. If you go in, because they're going to put you in whatever branch they want to put you in, they're going to put you where they want to put you." So I joined, and that started my career in the military. I went through basic training, and then 19 Zulu career field, which was armor crewman, and at that time, which was it's 19 series now. Back then it was 11, or it was an 11 series. So, but that kind of started my career in the military up to the time that I was deployed to Vietnam.
So do you have any grandkids?
What, do I have any grandkids? No, I don't.
No grandkids.
Not married. He's my son's devoted his life to law enforcement. He's a detective, and now he's he spends all his time doing that. He dates a lot, but not married yet. I guess one day he'll find the right girl, and maybe they'll settle down. Dolores and I keep hoping anyway.
Well, thank him as well for his service. And that's another area that we haven't talked a lot about, but our first responders, what they do here at home to keep us safe, our firefighters, our law enforcement, obviously during this time of COVID, our nurses, our doctors, our healthcare professionals, we're so grateful for them as they serve as well. So please tell your son that I said thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am, will do. He's been pretty blessed in his life too. I mean, he went all through Department of Defense schools naturally while I was in. He did his ROTC time in college. He got when he went to college, he had a scholarship to play sports while he was in college. He had a scholarship for soccer, and very fortunate, and he chose law enforcement when he got out, and he's just kind of stuck with it, and it's been a good thing for him.
Well, that's awesome. He would have gotten along great with my son, Mark. He loves soccer. Actually came home his freshman year and said, "Mom, I want to be a professional soccer player." And I was a single mom most of their life, and we struggled, didn't have a lot financially. But I always told my kids, whatever you put your mind to, you can achieve that. And so when he came in and told me that, and as I thought, Mark, you've never played soccer in your life and you're going to be a professional soccer player? I'm like, all right, son, well, you're going to have to practice hard to do that. And he did. He worked really hard. His first year, he got the most improved soccer player for his team. After he died, his coach shared that he thought that year Mark was probably the worst soccer player he'd ever seen in his life, and was in fact getting ready to try out with the Colorado Rapids, a professional soccer team out of Colorado, when he blew out his knee. So they would have got along well if they both loved soccer. So share with us a little bit. You served in Vietnam, a very tumultuous time as we went through a lot there. As you said, you were going to be a lottery number. You were going to be told you will go. And so you saw that handwriting on the wall and said, I'm going to sign up. But in essence, that was a whole different war than where we're at now, where everybody volunteers to go serve their country. So you were deployed to Vietnam. You were shot over there. Can you share with us? I'm sure that was, probably your most difficult experience that you went through. Can you tell us a little bit about your story and what happened?
Well, once I went and I went down and I joined the Army. I went through a recruiter and went on in, and I chose the field that I chose. And then I went from my training, from my AIT training, my advanced individual training, I went on to Germany, and I got deployed from Germany to Vietnam. So I went from there and then come back home. Dolores and I got married, and here I went to Vietnam. So it was just wham, bam, and I was gone. And a young 19, soon to be 20-year-old young man And I never thought about war or anything else, and here I go. So I get to Vietnam, and we get through our 2 week of jungle training. Once we got that completed, I finally get assigned to a unit, and we're operating for a while. The first time I got wounded, I refused my Purple Heart for the simple fact that it was just a scratch, and I didn't think that my dad raised me right, and I didn't think that it was deserving of a Purple Heart. I wasn't hurt. I didn't have to be medevaced. I didn't have to go anywhere. I put a Band-Aid on and I went back to work. And it was about 3 months later, and we were in a place called Mylock. And it was a company operation. We were doing a sweep. Give you kind of an idea of where that place is. It was west of Alpha 2 and Charlie 4. And if you were at Far Base Alpha 2, you could see the North Vietnamese flag flying on the other side of the border. We were all the way up in I-Corps, up above Quan Tri. It was a strange day while we were operating. We were operating around a French plantation, and I didn't see a lot of people moving around, but I kept seeing these guys just every once in a while, and I was the gunner on the tank, and I told my tank commander, I said, look, he said, I'm looking out here and I'm seeing this same guy every time we get somewhere. I said, don't you think that's strange? He said, it's just your imagination. Don't worry about it. Mm-hmm. Well, that evening we got into a logger site. We had just finished chow. It was starting to turn dark. And all of a sudden we were ambushed right where we were at. Everything started happening pretty quick. Unfortunately, the NBA, which was who we were fighting against, it wasn't Viet Cong. It was actually NBA regulars. And they got inside our coil. They got inside the company assembly. So we couldn't use the 50 cows. We couldn't shoot the tanks. We couldn't shoot beehive rounds. We couldn't do anything. We had to get off and we had to fight. That night was a long night. We fought hard. This was the hardest thing for me to finally get through myself, as it took me all the way to the time I got out of the Army to realize that the people I killed wasn't my fault. But I was killing guys with entrenching tool. I mean, just face to face. When it finally got daylight, everything settled down. We got control of the assembly area. Medevacs came in to get everybody out, and platoon sergeant told me, he said, man, you got to go. He said, you got to get on that medevac and go. And I said, well, I don't need to go. Why do you think I need to get on the medevac? He said, look at you. And there wasn't a spot on me that probably didn't have blood on it, but none of it was mine. Okay. I had made it through that night, but I will tell you, about 3 o'clock in the morning is when I looked up to the sky and I said, God, I said, I've never asked for anything. And I haven't. And I said, and I know I've not been as good a person as I could have been for you. I said, but if you get me out of this so I can go home and see my wife, I'll do anything you want me to do. I'll be a preacher if you want me to be a preacher. I'll do whatever you want me to do, Jesus. Just get me out of it. And I'm going to tell you right now, it is, to this day, I have never met an atheist on the battlefield. Not a one of them that's not praying. That night, everybody was praying. We were just wanting to get through the night, get people out of our AO and get security back up and be holding our own. And he looked at me and he said, well, aren't you bleeding? I said, no. I said, it's not my blood. It was blood from everybody else. And I took an opinion then, which was one of, you know, better you than me. I tried to get through that by thinking it was better that you died rather than I died. Okay. And then came the day when we had to, and that evening, that morning come up. But the very next day, we had to do a body count, lay the bodies out. And then that's when you go through their pockets. That's when you go through everything that's there. And you start looking at pictures of their families. And how many fathers that were laying there that's not going to go back to their family. And they were fighting in what they believed in, just like I was fighting in what I believed in. And that really didn't hit home right away until I got back to the States. But in the meantime, when that little action that we had there was over with, we got ambushed on the way back, and that's when I got wounded. We got all through that and made it all through the night and everything. And we got hit by an RPG team, and that's when I caught all the shrapnel and everything in my back and my leg and stuff, because I was up on the 50 cal when it hit on the back deck of the tank, and I caught the splash from the RPG, and that's where I got wounded and finally got medevaced and got sent to Cameron Bay and then to Okinawa. And I can remember that day very well when they asked me, they said, well, who do you want us to call? And I said, nobody. I said, I want to make those phone calls myself, because I know how Uncle Sam was back then when he called somebody. He said, your son or your husband's been wounded in combat, and this is it. You know, we'll get back with you once we know more. Okay, so I figured it was better coming from me than it was coming from Red Cross. So I chose not for the notification, and then I called Dolores and my dad myself. But when I got back stateside is when I had a hard time dealing with what I dealt with on the battlefield. I dealt with it on the battlefield by lying to myself. And, you know, better you than me. It's not, you know, I'm still here, and that's a good thing. It's not a good thing. The bad thing is combat, period, and what it does to you mentally and what it does to you physically, especially long-term combat. And when I got back, I found out what that was. When I would break up in a cold sweat at night, and I would be almost choking Dolores, and because I was reliving what I had done on the battlefield. I'm reliving it again, and I just couldn't get rid of it. I remember going to pick up my TA-50 at Fort Knox, Kentucky when I got released from the hospital. The Jeep driver, the first sergeant's Jeep driver, had me in the passenger side. I was a young sergeant then, young E5. And we went by the rifle range, and I didn't realize we were by the rifle range, but all of a sudden it opened up. The Jeep was doing 30 miles an hour, and I bailed out of the right side into the ditch. As soon as the M16s opened up, I was in the ditch. The driver hit the brakes, come skidding to a halt. He said, "Sergeant, are you okay?" And he thought I fell out. I said, "Son," I got up and brushed myself off. I said, "Son, I'm just fine." I got up in there, and we made about a mile down the road, and I looked over, and I said, "Driver?" And he said, "Yes, Sergeant." And I said, "Nobody knows about this. You understand? Don't you tell anybody I jumped out of this Jeep." And anyway, that was my reactions to things, and that's how I went through. And then I got really focused on being all I could be. I figured that maybe that'd get rid of it. Maybe I'll forget about it that way, so I made myself some timelines, and I said, I'm going to be a sergeant major by the time I have 16 years in the Army. I'm going to be a command sergeant major. That's what I want to be. I'm going to stay in here, and that's what I'm going to do. So I was doing everything I could. I was being all I could be. When I made sergeant major, and Dolores pinned it on me, then the goals then, were taking care of the troops. But then I had more time on my hands to think. And what happened then is God reached down and touched me. I reported for my first time to a unit to be the command sergeant major of the Combat Maneuver Training Center in Hornsfeld, Germany. When I got there, there was an old battalion commander of mine that was there, and he was the BSB commander at the time. And we went to church together on Sunday morning. And he said, Ralph, he said, I noticed something. He said, we just went to Mass. We went to a Catholic Mass, and you didn't get up and take communion. Why not? And I said, well, Colonel, I'm not Catholic. I said, I just went to church to go to church and listen to the sermon. He said, well, you know, we could fix that. You know, we can fix that. And I went back to my room that night, and I thought about that, and I woke up in the middle of the night thinking about that. And so the next day I called him up and I said, you know, I think I'd like to fix that. The Holy Spirit finally reached down and grabbed a hold of me. And finally, God said, I've got some things for you to do. And what I ended up having to do after I got through and I became Catholic because my wife was Catholic. I will tell you how this happened. Was born Baptist and raised Baptist. I became Catholic in Germany as a command sergeant major. I went through what they call RCIA, and a priest took me through my whole time, and he said, when is your wife going to be here? I said, she'll be here in a month. He said, well, we'll get done so we can marry you in the church. Dolores and I didn't get married in church. We went to the Justice of Peace to get married. And Dolores had asked me when Cliff was born, she said, Ralph, do you mind if I baptize Cliff Catholic? I said, no. I said, not at all, because you're going to have to keep up with that part of his life. I said, I'm not got time for that, Dolores. I'm going to be busy, being all I can be, okay? I've got a career that I got to worry about, and I got you that I got to worry about, and him that I got to worry about. So she did that. And make a long story short, when I picked her up at the airport, I told her, I said, Dolores, I said, we were driving back to Hornsfeld. I said, I got something I got to tell you. And she said, well, what's that? And I said, well, tomorrow I'm going to be baptized and we're going to get married in church. You know, here I am, a command sergeant major, an armor command sergeant major. I've been a cav platoon sergeant. I've been an armor platoon sergeant, and tears are running down both sides of my face. And finally, I'm having some relief in my life. The Holy Spirit has just set in, and I'm having an amazing feeling out of my life because I'm letting him take control and I'm not trying to control. I finally learned to turn it over. It's got to go. You know, you're responsible for things. That doesn't change anything as a soldier, and it doesn't change anything as a veteran. You're still responsible, but let it go. God does not give us more than we can handle. Not at all. And we went back, we got married in the church, and we started going to church regular. I retired from there. I can remember on the deployment to Desert Storm, Dolores, my son, flew in from school. He had been there for the summer. He flew in from college. We flew him to Germany. Then he came home again for Christmas. And I was making my deployment. We were deploying 177 armor to the desert. I was leaving on 1 January. Well, on 1 January, Dolores and Cliff took me to my office with all of my stuff. And then she left from that office and took him to the airport so he could go back to school. So here I am, I'm leaving her again by herself in Germany and I'm taking off for another combat tour, And but this time, I'm more confident about my tour, and I'm more confident about who I am and what I was there for. I told Dolores, don't worry, I'll be back. And sure enough, I came back. And shortly after that is when she asked me, would you retire if I asked you to? And I said, well, you've pretty much done everything I've done. And yes, dear, I'd do it. And just so happened that when I said that, God jumped in again. My phone rang. It was another battalion commander I served with, who was now a brigade commander, and he was getting out, and he needed somebody to come work for him. And that's how I got into the building industry here in Atlanta. He just happened to be here. He asked me, he said, Ralph, are you tired of playing Army? Do you want to get out? And I got a job for you. And I said, well, it's amazing that you called me, because this is what I'm doing. I worked for a one-star general, and I just gave him notice for a year that I would be there. I said, can you wait a year? And he said he could wait a year. So I did my retirement ceremony in Germany, and then came straight to the United States and went straight to work for him.
Very cool. What year was that, Ralph, when you got out?
Oh, shoot, that was back in, that was in 1995.
1995.
Yep.
Wow. And how was the transition? I can imagine that having already a new mission and that you had another job lined up and another career to go into. What was the transition like for you at that point?
Well, at that point, the transition was really, really, really tough. It was still a tough thing for me to leave the combat and the military part and separate it from the civilian part, because every time I turned around, I found fault in something that was civilian. Every time I turned around and looked, I was like, well, why did that guy do that? Or why did this happen here? Or why didn't that guy just go do what I told him? What I told him to do? Why didn't he just go do that?
When you were a command sergeant major, they had to just go do that.
That's exactly what happened, and people weren't late for work, But now all of a sudden they are late for work. But I was still carrying some of Vietnam with me. When I pulled those pictures out of the pockets of those dead soldiers that we had just killed, that haunted me up until the time I got out of the Army. The way I finally got rid of that was doing God's work. Mm-hmm. That's what got it out of me. Yeah. I'm involved in several different things now. I run the widows program for our church. My church has got 800 families in the church. And what we do is we try to take care of all the widows in the church. We go repair things at their house, do things and all that. And I raise money with a group of guys that help me. And we do the projects. And if they can't pay for it, we do. If they can, they pay for it and we provide the work. I work several veterans, the things that we do here in Atlanta. One is feed the homeless veteran, which is a big eye opener. The other is out at the VA hospital. We have a place in Atlanta called the Eagle's Nest at the VA hospital. And that's where your very ill veterans are up on there. Some of them leave there and do make it home. Most of them do not. And we do a lot of things with them to keep them occupied and occupy their time and talk with them and be with them. But when you wake up in the morning and the first thing you say to yourself, or the first thing I say to myself is, thank you, Lord. Thank you for allowing me to greet another day. Lord, please guide me through this day and let me find someone who needs help today. And if I find that person, please guide me and help me to do the right things for them and to make their day a little bit better. Because every time that I think I've got it tough, and this is where I finally got through this, I can just look around me and there's a lot of people that are a lot worse off than I am that need my help. And if I'm sitting here worrying about myself, I can't help them. I've got to turn all that over to God. I got to let him have it and let it go. And
I think that's one of those themes that if it hasn't come through every day on the 17, a different podcast, it's almost every day, is how important it is to serve other people. When you're struggling, when you're in the midst of despair, when you're going through loss or grief or transition or tragedy or whatever it is you're doing, if you quit looking inward and having a pity party for yourself and start focusing on someone else and doing for others, it makes such a difference. You feel so good when you can do something for others. And so that service is such an important part of that. Not only did you serve all those years in the military, but I love that you continue to serve, and that was the primary thing that God used in your life to help heal you and to help you with those things. And it boggles my mind, when I think back to combat, the earlier wars, whether it was Vietnam or World War I or World War II. So much of that battle was hand to hand. You were looking them in the face. It wasn't the RPGs, the explosions far away, the sniper. And so God bless you for what you have endured for this country. Thank you for the wounds that you carry. And we had Eli Crane, a Navy SEAL, on earlier, and he's working on a book called Weaponizing Your Wounds. And he asked me to write some things for that book. And so I was working on that this morning, got up early to try to knock that out. And I just think of the wounds that you carry and how God has used those wounds as a weapon, not to hurt other people, but to help other people. We think back to, our first example was Christ, who was brutally beat, who was stabbed, who was hung on a cross for us. And his wounds are what provide the healing for you and for me and for anybody else that believes and accepts that. And so that it says we share in his suffering. We share in Christ's suffering. And man, that man suffered more than anyone I know. So what I've gone through, in the different tragedies and trials and loss, husband committing suicide, son being, giving his life in combat, is nothing compared to what Christ has endured for us. And so if he can be that example for us to take our wounds and use them for his glory, like you're doing, thank you, sir. God bless you. It has been our privilege and honor to have you on today. Thank you. I know those things are difficult to share, and we appreciate that very much, you being vulnerable and being willing to share those struggles you've gone through. And on behalf of all of America, our Vietnam vets were treated so horrifically when they came home. And I just want to say to you and to every other Vietnam vet that's on here today, welcome home. Thank you for what you've done and for what you've given for our country. We won't ever forget that. So thank you, sir.
Well, you're quite welcome. And the thing that I want every speaker that's listening right now, that's going to speak, to know, and everybody to know, is I always ask, I asked God one day, I said, why me, Lord? Why did I make it through Vietnam? Did I make it through the military, through some really tough times during the Cold War on the border, through Desert Storm? What is it you want from me? And then the answer came. And everything happens for a reason, whether it is a loss of life or whether it is getting you through a whole bunch of tough times and getting to the end of it. It's all happens for a reason. And for Christ, this is the reason. I know you lost your son. I've read and I cannot know the grief that you felt when that happened. But I look at you now and I know why that happened. I look at what you are doing and the impact that you are making on all these people around you. And I know that your son's life was not in vain.
Mm. Yeah, I say that all the time. God does not waste the pain. When we allow him, he will work through that for his glory.
Yeah. He is up there watching you now, smiling from ear to ear, because you're doing what you need to be doing right now, and you're doing God's work. And every one of these folks that come on here to speak today, myself included, if I just touched one of you, thank goodness, because I believe that God got me through everything to start that Widows Project, to work with the veterans, the homeless veterans downtown, to feed the hungry. And I'm trying to do all I can do and put all I can in there. And I heard a young lady named Debbie tell me the same thing. She was just wondering where the loose time, I had a little bit of loose time here, but I just filled it up. And Debbie, thank you for letting me come on, and thank you for letting me talk. And you just don't know the relief that you've given me right now. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. God bless you. Ralph, do you have time to stick around for some questions and answers from our guests?
Sure do.
Ryan, what do you have for us?
Brother, hey, thank you. I know when I first asked you to come on, there was some hesitation and uncertainty, and I just feel so blessed that, you joined us, and from your generation and your era, we're so grateful and thankful. And I know you haven't been following probably the message board a lot because you were doing such a great job of sharing your story, but there are so many people that have been thanking you for your transparency, your authenticity, your story. Somebody said, yes, you touched my heart. I'm so blessed to hear your story. Let me see if I can find a couple. Ralph, you are a true American patriot. Thank you for your service. Thank you, Ralph. Totally grateful to you for all you've done in life and all of you shared today. I normally don't read those, brother. I normally send those out afterwards, but I just wanted to reassure you today that there were gifts that you were throwing out by sharing your story. So thank you, my man. I'm intrigued, and I don't have a lot of questions. So these are going to kind of be, I guess they're going to be Ryan questions for you, Ralph.
Okay.
How about the marriage piece? We've had some great conversations with people talking about the challenge of marriage and reestablishing that. You mentioned some of obviously your challenges you had during the nights and all, but we need some tips. You're at 50 years, brother. That is quite amazing. I want to honor that tonight because we don't get a lot of those numbers, but
Yes.
Give us some tips. Give our listeners some tips of what goes into, making a military marriage succeed for so long, brother.
Well, I think actually, especially when you're young, we worked together a lot until I was deployed. But as I matured into the military, there were a lot of deployments, to tank gunnery, to do this, to do that, and we were gone for 3-4 weeks at a time, and then back home. Absence makes the heart fonder, But the big thing is the trust and the love. And there's not been one time that I have been deployed, that I had been on a extended field problem or anything where I came home all of a sudden and Dolores didn't expect me. I have had some soldiers as a first sergeant and a command sergeant major that have had to go home early, and I've looked at them and I said, you better call home, let your wife know you're coming home. And there was a reason I told those gentlemen that. I never, ever had to call home to let my wife know I was coming home unexpectedly. You know why? Because I knew where she would be. And she was always there, and she could count on that from me. I was always there, and always there for her. And it's just the little things you do. It's I love her with all my heart. I mean, she's been tremendous with Cliff and everything else, and just her putting up with 20 plus years of military life after having a father who was also a soldier, okay, a career soldier, and that's how we met at Fort Knox. And then her stepping into that with me. That's when she asked me to retire. I couldn't tell her no. I couldn't tell her no. And she was very hesitant to ask me that. And the reason I couldn't tell her no is marriage works two ways. It's a give and take institution. And sometimes you give and sometimes you take. And you just got to know when those right times are. And I think when everything meshes and everything comes together, you realize when those are. And the military can either make you stronger or make you further apart. It depends on the person. And in our case, it just made us stronger.
Let's see. One other one I had. Let's see. Oh, yeah. One other thing I wanted to ask Ralph. You know, we've talked about this generationally. It's very challenging for your group with veterans a lot of times to share. Obviously, sharing has become therapeutic for you as well. You mentioned, you know, tears and relief. Anything that you want to share? If there are other guys out there, you know, your time frame. And I'm not just saying today, Ralph, because we have people on this call, but in the future. If this shows again, what would you encourage that group about sharing story?
Well, what I would encourage is they've got to talk. If you don't talk about it, you keep it all tied up inside, then it's always going to be there. And it's, I got rid of mine by sitting and having a long talk with a priest. And him and I mean, whether it's your preacher at your church, or if you're Catholic, it's your priest or whoever it is, a lot of times you can sit down and really talk about these things, especially when you have guilt. And I had a lot of guilt. A lot of guilt was there from, you know, knowing that the gentleman laying in front of me had a family, just like I do. There was no difference. He was fighting for something different, but he was fighting for the same reason I was. I mean, his beliefs, you know, and I can't fault anybody for that. It's when you hold that inside. I kept feeling that I made this lady a widow, and I put his two children. For example, one picture I picked up had a woman and a little girl and a little boy in it, and it was his wife, and it was his daughter and his son. And here I made his daughter and son an orphan and his wife a widow because I killed this guy. That's a lot of guilt to carry. It really is. You got to let it go. It's got to go. And sitting and talking with your clergy or talking with other veterans, you can let that go and tell your story. Tell your story. Don't be afraid to tell it. You've got to do that. And I was afraid to do that for a long time. You know, you just got to let it go. It's just what it is. And I will tell you, one of the things that have really helped me is I do a lot of volunteer work at the National Cemetery in Canton, Georgia, Brian. And you would be surprised out there. What you do is you help with some of the funerals, and you would be surprised how many of these men and women that are buried out there that are from my generation have nobody there when they get buried, except maybe one or two people, and sometimes not that. So we go and we stand and we're there for them when they get buried. You know, so I do a lot of that too.
Well, thank you, Ralph. You know, we just had, one of our programs is our Random Acts of Kindness in response to Mark's amazing last letter home. And he said, when's the last time you paid for a stranger's cup of coffee or a meal or a tank of gas? And that was how I began processing through the grieving process. Some of that serving by accepting Mark's challenge and doing those things just out of my own pocket. You know, I didn't have a foundation in the early days. And we expanded that program up to a $5,000 grant. And the veteran themselves can't come ask for help because unfortunately we have found veterans that are just going from charity to see what they can take. And that's not who we want to help. We want to help someone whose friend steps up and said he would never come ask for help. He'd be the last one that really needed our help. And we had a funeral home reach out to us from Texas that was one of our Vietnam vets who had no family, nobody to be there, nobody even to pay for his funeral. So we stepped in and paid for his funeral and then reached out to the Patriot Guard riders there to be able to be there for that gentleman, because we do need to make sure that those that don't. So thank you, Ralph, for stepping up and doing that for those veterans that don't have anybody, because that's important as well. But thank you again for being here today. We're reaching the end of our time, and I know I've got an F-35 flying overhead again. I live in the flight path for Luke Air Force Base, and that is the sound of freedom. Sometimes it gets a little rattly on here, but like I said, that's the sound of freedom. I just think as we look back over the last 2 weeks that Ryan and I have invested daily in this project and tried to work around our other schedules and the craziness that's involved there and the intense schedules, but just to see the impact that it's making and hear back from you guys, the comments that this is just what I needed for today, or the strength or the encouragement. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for receiving that gift back that we've given to you. I just pray that at the end of each one of these, each day, that you will have been inspired, you will have been encouraged, and that you will rise up then and say, on me. I'm going to lead in my family. I'm going to lead in where I work, in my community, in my church. I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to take these things that all these speakers have shared, whether it's making sure I'm eating healthy, I'm exercising, having a mindset that chooses to focus on the positive and not on the negative, and work on those things that I can control, not fearful, not stress over those things that I can't control. And it is step by step. We don't become giants overnight. It's a process in our life that we build these in and have to continually work on and continually build in those. But for both Ralph and I, we both shared our faith is what has given us the strength to do what we do. And my challenge to all of you each day has been that you would be in the Word just 5 minutes a day, just 5 minutes. Pick up a Bible, even if you're not a believer, just pick it up. The strength that you will receive from that, reading that, and the inspiration you will get, and then our ultimate prayer is that your lives will be changed, and that you will recognize when Christ hung on that tree, and he said, on me, the sins of the world are on me. I did this so that you can have eternal life, that you can be free from the consequences of your sin. And so that's our prayer for you. We thank you all for being here. We're excited to have you back tomorrow for podcast number 18. Laura Grant, she's a military wife. Her husband, talk about a rock your world story. Please join us. If there's anything we can do for you, please, please, please. We are here. We're ready to serve you. If you are struggling, please don't hesitate to reach out. americasmightywarriors@gmail.com is our email. You can go to our website, americasmightywarriors.org. And if you want to learn more about Mark, there's a lot of books. All the books on our website tell Mark's story or are dedicated to Mark. So please, we're here for you. We're still marching strong, even though things have changed drastically for us. And our prayer is that you would still march strong, even in the midst of your changes. God bless you. On me, let's go.
When fear flashes its teeth like a lion, when evil roars and walls begin to shake, there's a strength that's not my own. There's a fire in my bones. He is with me and his hand is ever on me. Follow on me, we're marching out into the night. Follow on me, we're standing up against a giant. Follow on me, we might be walking in the fire, but if it's where we're meant to be, then on